Hey guys, Steve Good here with the Scroll Saw Workshop. I want to talk tonight about a technique on the scroll saw called stack cutting. Now, I know a lot of you guys that have been around and gals that have been around a long time have been stack cutting for years. But here at the blog, I get new people coming in all the time. And some of these techniques that we take for granted are not so obvious to somebody who's just getting started. And recently I had a couple of emails asking about stack cutting and how it's accomplished. So I'm going to do this little slideshow tonight. It's not a video, it's just a slideshow. It's just easier to do it this way, and this way I can kind of ramble on through the photographs. We're going to talk about stack cutting, why you would stack cut, and then also the different techniques for stack cutting. Now, I think it's pretty obvious that the reason you would want to stack cut is because you can cut more than one of the pattern that you're cutting at a time. So in this case that you see here on the screen, let's say that this pattern called for us to cut 2 of these teddy bears. And you can see right here on the pattern it shows that we need 2. Well, we could print this pattern out twice, put it on 2 pieces of wood and cut them both out. And that works fine. And if you have the time or you just enjoy cutting, then by all means do it that way. But a more efficient way, and especially if you're trying to sell your product when you finish, of course time is money, so a more efficient way is to cut both of them at the same time. And that's what we're going to talk about. Okay, here we've got our pattern. It's telling us to cut 2, and in this case I've got 2 pieces of Baltic birch plywood. Now I'm just using 1/8 inch Baltic birch plywood here, but you can stack cut up to 1 inch thick wood if you have to. You wouldn't normally want to do that, but generally when we're stack cutting, we're cutting thinner woods. Now on this 1/8 inch thick Baltic birch plywood, I could probably easily stack cut 4, 5, or 6 of these at once, but in this case our pattern calls for 2, so that's what we're going to do. Now to do this, we have to take these 2 boards and put them together and hold them in the position to where they won't move while we're cutting. That's important. And there's different techniques to do that, and I'll show you just a couple here and talk about maybe 1 or 2 more. A long time ago, I used to actually use brad nails to hold the boards together to do my stack cutting. It's really quick, it's easy to do, and in this case, using this 1/8 inch thick Baltic birch plywood, you have to be a little more careful that the nails don't go all the way through and come out the back, and then of course that would scratch your table and your scroll saw. So you want to try to be careful. If you do punch the nail all the way through, a little Dremel tool, you can just Dremel off the tip or use a file and file it off. But in general, it's just easier to be careful and not let it go all the way through. And here you can see I've got the brads in each corner, and this is a very effective way of holding these 2 boards together. Then we can apply our pattern to the boards however we're going to do that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then we can cut it out and get our 2 pieces. The method that I prefer, well, let's go back here 1 second. Another method that some people use, and it's not my preferred method, I think it's a little bit messy, but some people will actually use 2-sided tape, and they'll put the 2-sided tape between the 2 boards. I find it a little bit hard to use, and sometimes it's hard to take apart, and if the fretwork is delicate at all, sometimes the 2-sided tape will actually break the fretwork. So the 2 methods I prefer are either the brad nails, or the method I normally use is the blue painter's tape. And with the blue painter's tape, we're just simply going to wrap the 2 boards together. Now the way I do it is I generally lay the tape down like this, place my 2 boards on the tape, and then just start folding it over. And then once I get the centerpiece wrapped, once I get the centerpiece wrapped around, then I'll finish wrapping the rest of the board with tape. Now I generally just go end to end. I don't generally do the edges. Depending on the pattern, there may be some rare circumstances where you'll want to put tape around the opposite direction just to make sure everything holds together. But for this simple little teddy bear, this is more than fine. Now, of course, we've got our 2 boards put together and we need to apply our pattern. Different ways, like everything else with the scroll saw, there's more than one way to do everything. So you want to apply your pattern to the 2 blanks you have together. I use spray adhesive. You can also use these glue sticks. different ways of doing it, whatever you prefer. Some people will put the pattern down and then cover it with clear box tape. Whatever. They all work as long as you're pleased with the way it cuts and the way it works. Use the method you like. I use the spray adhesive. Can be a little bit messy sometimes, but I'm so used to it, I don't think too much about it anymore. And also these glue sticks are generally cheaper than the spray adhesive, which is another reason to do it. And the clear box tape wrapped around on top of the pattern is even cheaper. Of course, now you need to drill your entry holes. When you're stack cutting, one important thing is once you drill your two interior, well, in this case we've got two interior cuts. So once I've drilled these two interior cut holes, I also want to drill a hole on the outside of the pattern to cut the exterior of the pattern. And it's tempting sometimes not to drill that hole and to just start your cut from the edge. But when you're stack cutting, that's kind of a bad idea because you want these boards to stay together, and sometimes you'll weaken it quite a bit by coming in from the edge. So go ahead and drill your hole in the exterior of the pattern, and we'll use that to cut around the outline. We're going to take it over to our scroll saw now. When you're stack cutting, of course, you always want to do, and this is generally true in all cutting, but especially true in stack cutting, you want to do all your interior cuts first, because if you cut your exterior out, then you lose the integrity of the boards being together. So cut all the interior cuts. And you can see here after I cut this first interior cut, we have two waste pieces, the bottom board and the top board. Finish cutting all the interior cuts. Now we can go ahead and thread our blade through our hole to cut the exterior, and you can see up to this point our board is still perfectly put together because we haven't taken the integrity of the board by cutting from the edges. And we can finish our exterior cut. You can see we have our two pieces. Once we remove the box tape and the pattern, we've got the two pieces cut out and ready to use for whatever pattern we're going to use them on. And you can see at this point the board that we had stacked together, the integrity of the board is still there. Nothing has changed because we haven't damaged the edges where the tape is. So it's still held together even after we finish the cut. That's stack cutting. Obviously, stack cutting is mostly there to increase your speed, but there are times when you want two pieces to match identical, and of course the easiest way to make them match exactly is to stack cut them. So sometimes that's important, so that's another reason to stack cut. If you're selling your projects, it's just critical that you cut the time down that's required to make that product to maximize the profit you're going to make from it. So if you're going to sell your products, make sure you learn how to stack cut and use it at every possible opportunity. Okay, that's stack cutting. I know it's kind of a basic tutorial, but there's people out there that haven't been around been here with me on the Scroll Saw Workshop for years, and they just haven't seen this technique, so I wanted to share it with everybody. Okay, I'm Steve Good. Thanks for being here with me at the Scroll Saw Workshop. Catch you next time.